Welcome to Slaughterhouse Stories. I hope you enjoy the story I have for you tonight. A Promise of the Heart. My first love was a pretty girl, with golden hair and skin of pearl. We thought our meeting one of chance, our senses caught in that first glance, and watched our love unfurl. Our lives entwined at dizzying rate, as if our love was set by fate, and none were taken by surprise, when talk of marriage did arise, and soon we'd set a date. The engagement ring I slipped upon her hand was an expensive gold band, topped in the center with a ruby sullen red, as if from some heart it had been fed, to suit the love she did demand. For though gentle in her looks so fair, a passion dwelt far under there, a will of iron and mood to match, and though she was indeed a catch, I often wondered at her stare. For day by day I saw her look upon that ring the time she took, and then glance at me as if to say, "I've caught you now, you can't get away," like a fish pierced upon a hook. And then one night as we lay in bed, in a simple monotone she'd said, "Promise me your heart forever, that on this ring not even death will sever the love that holds us in its stead." At this, her hand had gripped mine tight, as if to bind me to my words that night, and laughing, I'd repeated them, addressing that dark and solemn gem, for sleep had stolen my sight. A month before the wedding day, she fell ill and wasted fast away. I sat beside her bed and wept, as my love, adrift in illness, slept, but could no longer stay. I held her hand as she passed on, until the light in her eyes had gone, and wiping back a final tear, I promised all those who stood near she would be the only one. Before her death, to all she'd stressed, she wished in her bridal gown be dressed, and so buried in silken white, as if a princess waiting for her knight, laying peaceful at her rest. Looking at her serene face, her head rounded by the veil of lace, I looked down to where her hands they lay, and following her final say, the ruby ring took pride of place. Love, however, will have its sport, and turned my promise into naught. So it was, I loved once more, a girl whose charms I did adore, for time is long, and memory short. Her beauty was not marred by a nature dark and hard. Instead, her mood was light, her eyes both kind and bright, and she healed a heart once scarred. Happy times with her had led to me having thoughts long since fled of a future spent just her and me, and I knew she'd eagerly agree, so made my mind that we should wed. But on the day that I proposed, dreams of my first love now deposed began to fill my every night, with visions wove of sickly fright, of her displeasure now disclosed. Asleep I dream of graveyard's gloom, and me in the trappings of a groom. Thus dressed, I'd hear a happy cheer, coming from a church door near, and walk in to some unknown doom. A church aisle stretched far ahead, each row populated with the dead, and whilst the organ wailed within, they threw confetti of corpses' skin, as I stumbled to my love to wed. They looked at me with empty eyes, their sockets round and black inside, a need to flee, to simply run, but my steps would only lead me on, until I stood beside the bride. A vice-like grip would take my hand, and there in frozen terror stand. My bride would then turn her head, a worm-riddled mockery of she now dead, my first love's wedding now at hand. Every night the self-same dream, till my sanity now stretched the seam, and every night I saw it clear. The thing that she had held most dear, the ring and its ruddy gleam. Maybe I was mad by now, but I knew the dreams had showed me how to finally free myself from she, whose spirit would not let me be. And so I made a vow. Only the moon saw me leave, at midnight on my wedding eve, to the graveyard to where she lay, to dig at all that miserable clay, and from her hand that ring to cleave. I no longer wondered if I should, only knowing that I would. So gripped with anger and nascent fear, I hunted she I once held dear, until the spade struck wood. I clambered in that hellish hole, and looked upon my wretched goal, all to claim back that cursed ring, and end the nightmares of that thing that stalked my dreams and wrecked my soul. And then, as if in part the devil's jest, the hollowed silence was unseemly blessed by the maddening call of my phone, that incessant demanding drone, and to my head the phone I pressed. My new love's voice filled my ear, her voice too fresh and crystal clear to be heard in such an awful place, amongst this deathly quiet race. But still I stopped to hear. She gushed about a gift she'd found, left on her bed and simply bound. From me she'd known it must have come, for its beauty had nearly struck her dumb, a golden ring with ruby round. What words I said I do not know, mind gone blank and thoughts gone slow. A single dreadful thought was left, and with that spade the lid I heft, to see what horror was below. There she lay in rotting glory, her nails and hair grown long and hoary, a Cinderella bound in death, whose stench not looks, not took one's breath, a bride in some horrific story. She wore a torn and mildewed gown, of mottled green and rancid brown, her flesh and skin picked clean by time and morbid things obscene, bearing swollen maggots for a crown. With wild eyes I cast around, within the casket and surrounded ground, but no ring I saw in that horrid place, just a rictus grin on that mocking face, till I heard a shallow beating sound. I followed the noise to whence it came. Real or not, it meant the same. The odd sound that my attention caught was not the thing that I had sought, and then I saw the source of blame. The sight was of no wedding band, but in seeing, I knew myself full damned. For in that grisly meeting, I saw my own heart beating, grasped tightly in her bony hand. Now here I sit in broken dread, in the grave of one thought long since dead. To her, a promise made on my heart was an oath from which she would not part, and from me now has all hope fled. For around the grave stand figures tall, spades held in bony hands of all, a burial party just for me, and my first love for eternity. And on me clumps of dirt now fall. I shall write these words and place them near. Whilst time is left, I'll state it clear. Make no promises you cannot keep, for in truth the dead, they do but sleep, and a broken word is much to fear. That's it for tonight's story. But before we end things, check out the Slaughterhouse Stories podcast, available at all your favorite podcast sites. So download and subscribe. Be a listener, not a victim. And as always, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed tonight's story, please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay spooky.